It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs podcast, podcasted from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis and I am the host of the show. If you are new here, hi. If you are coming back here, hi. My guest on the show this episode is Jane Yee. I'll talk a little bit about that discussion and about Jane in a second. But at the moment, I must say I'm slightly, quagmire. Not as in Family Guy, but that word. One sec, I feel in a bit of a quagmire, but it doesn't feel quite the right word. Hang on. No, a quagmire is like a conundrum, isn't it? A soft, boggy area of land that gives way underfoot. An awkward, complex, or hazardous situation, yeah, that'll do it. I'm in a bit of a quagmire around work, as a lot of people at my work are at the moment, because 150 redundancies, FTEs, that's the technical term for full-time equivalents, were announced unexpectedly to be made redundant. I think it feels like a couple of months ago now. And then today, when you expect, like when you bargain to buy a used car, to come back with something in the middle that kind of suits all parties, are marginally better at least, in terms of basically what I'm saying is the union getting involved after that initial announcement. Today, the next kind of main announcement was made, and it 150. It's going to go down a little. It's at 170 now. So everyone's job security is in question, but also there is a wider kind of organisational and existential angst that has come from all of this. It can all become a bit Hunger Games, which it kind of hasn't been so much that, at least, friends and employees and colleagues and around my immediate vicinity behaving like that. But, I'm meaning that it sort of puts everyone in a weird situation with sort of who's going to stay and who's going to go, but also other things happen, like anyone who's listened to this show for more than a few episodes, I've probably mentioned where I work. So in other words, I've been kind of a flag waver for where I work. So now it's weird to refer to where you work with your colleagues and other people as kind of the other. I don't want to say the enemy, that's too strong, because I'd very much like to stay working there, but I'm meaning in this situation it's hard to do that when you're discussing things like, I say, a union getting involved with an organisation, and an organisation suddenly, it seems, behaving in a way that feels quite unexpected, especially after what we were informed to do mahi-wise over lockdown. I won't say much more than that, because as I say, it's a tender situation, but it's a shit situation to be in. So I'll tell you what, all I'll say at the end of that is there's an email that apparently you either get or you don't get on December 1st that I'd rather not get, and I feel terrible for everyone who will get one, regardless of whether it's me or not. Does anyone need a barista? So Jane's, I'll tell you what, I'm probably not even that good at that these days. I met Jane because she went through, she's a bit rude, Jane went through the degree I teach on now, particularly the major that I'm involved with more and more these days, radio and audio media. And she got in touch with us about coming in to do something with students. And I do a podcasting course, and she is the Don Dada-S of podcasting at Spinoff. And so sort of a couple of meetings come from there, one which is me going in for an hour just to have a look around the Spinoff. I took the opportunity to go in and chat with her. I'll have her in to see my students next year. Then I said, hey, would you like to come and do a podcast? Because, and I found this biography on New Zealand On Screen, which will do just nicely, thank you very much, because not only is an interesting role that Jane's in that I would like to chat about for a whole episode if I could, but after majoring in radio for her communications degree, Jane Yee joined TV2's late-night music slot M2 in 2001. which we talk about on the episode, and began a 3-year stint hosting music show Squeeze, which we talk about on the episode. In 2005, Yi joined C4 full-time as a presenter, which we talk about on the episode, where she directed a series of homegrown profiles of Kiwi musicians, which we didn't talk about on the episode. She went on to spend time as promotions manager for the Kiwi arm of Universal Music, which we brush over in the episode. The long-time blogger, see, that is a little bit out of date because we talk about that on the episode and chuckle about how things like blogging are of a time, and also how she won a Canon Media Award for blogging, which is also arguably of the time. She also hosts a podcast about television website The Spinoff, which we discuss as, and something interesting Jane said was, she didn't lay claim to this, but it's got me thinking about it. No, she didn't have to lay claim to it. She said it'd be one of the earliest podcasts in New Zealand. And I suddenly thought, shivers, I wonder what the first podcast in New Zealand ever was. Can anyone lay claim to that? Can anyone give me a lead on that? What was the first podcast in New Zealand? Anyway, great chat. Interestingly, where we get to in Jane's life, which in the scheme of things, except for talking about Spinoff kind of briefly at the end, where we get to is about 2010, but predominantly up to about, 2004 or 5. Normally that's about the first 20 minutes of the episode, but, if someone's chatting, you just let them keep chatting. And it was great. And I think maybe since Martin Bosley, I've stretched out into a weird kind of Rogan-esque space where I'm suddenly expecting 4 hours, but really you got to stop at 1. It's a great chat. It's really enjoyable. Thank you, Jane, for offering your time. Like the show, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook, Verbal Highs on Twitter. You can contact me, verbalhighs@gmail. Always on the lookout for guests. Oh, goodness gracious. Look, sun's out. Days are longer. Could be worse. Thank you, Jane. Enjoy this episode, folks.
This is Dr. Janet's Verbal Highs.
As you probably know with this style of podcast, and also asking guests to come on in for the love of it, for the love of media, we just kind of jumped straight in.
Yeah.
Kia ora, Jane.
Kia ora. How's it going?
Good. And you were lost, you were trapped deep in thought and ended up, on the wrong side of the road and lost.
That's a very generous treatment of what was going on there. I was on the wrong side of the road looking at the numbers and clearly at the ripe old age of 43 still don't know my odds from my evens, and was wondering why your street number wasn't coming up, and then I realised, that's because I'm on the wrong side of the road. It's
actually a thing. We do sound like, no, it's not an old people thing. For old people. It's a general problem I have with cities these days is that most buildings don't have street numbers on them.
There are a lot of, in my defence, there are a lot of properties really close by to you that do not have street numbers on them.
Imagine being one of the many food and goods and services delivery people in this city. Where do you live? I mean, not literally where do you live, but roughly what suburb?
I'm in Mount Roskill.
Yeah. Have you been there for a while?
I've been kind of in the Roskill, Sandringham area for like 10 years.
Yeah. And from Auckland?
I'm from Auckland.
Yeah.
Very proud to be from Tamaki Makaurau. I think it gets a bit of a bad rap, but you can't beat, Wellington on a good day apparently, but Auckland also.
Why did you say, what do you mean it gets a rap? Everywhere gets a rap.
Yeah, that's true.
No, seriously, what do you mean? What specifically about Auckland springs to mind?
I mean, I think, it's just maybe, I don't know if it's Auckland itself, but Aucklanders, maybe. Fair enough, there's good and bad people everywhere you go.
Yeah, but that, what does parochial mean? I forgot the right word. Do you know what that means? It's like small-minded.
Yeah, small-minded.
That's a real, example is my folks have a batch in the Coromandel as of the last few years, and when lockdown ended, the woman who's really lovely, she runs a little store there and she's really turned it around and done great things. She's made this tiny little settlement, 150 people, the shop works. But she posted something like looking forward to the F and Jaffas coming back, but it wasn't humorous or enjoyable. It was just yuck. Yeah. And then the post went down, and I realised that I reckon a few other people there were come on, they come in and kind of keep this community going.
Yeah, so it was a bit of that during COVID times when the Auckland border was closed off, and you were getting a lot of chatter from down the line about as if we had generated the virus and decided that we were the ones who wanted to take it around the country. It's not really how it works.
It's Wuhan and then us. That's what's going on. Whereabouts in Auckland did you grow up? I
actually grew up in the eastern suburbs. Lovely place to grow up, but I'd never live there again.
You just made me realise, because I'm from Wellington, so Auckland's still a sort of journey of discovery for me, even after about 13, 15 years here. But East isn't mentioned in the same sort of framing of like West means something, right?
Yeah,
like South means something, for better or for worse, both of them.
Let me give you some context. So
East is a bit richy, kind of Howicky, kind of like.
That's the true East Auckland. Where you've got sort of Botany, Howick, East Tamaki, which is where East and South join. But the eastern suburbs are the central eastern suburbs. So you're talking Mission Bay, Kohimarama, Glendowie, St Heliers kind of area.
Right, and which one were you?
I was in St Heliers and then Kohimarama.
And went to school around there?
I went to school in Glendowie, so I sort of straddled 3 suburbs at one point.
Were you a kind of gregarious, born for media type child? A lot of people come from like being drama nerds, that kind of background.
No, I wasn't. I mean, I would have liked to have been. I think my
comm students are all show ponies, man.
Yeah, my show poniness comes purely from being the youngest of 5 girls.
Right.
So and the runt of the litter.
Yeah.
So I, to be heard, had to be loud, and that was pretty much it. You know, like I just gave myself the role of the fall guy, the jokester, and then. I think in primary school through intermediate, I was kind of like a big fish in a small pond, and then I went to high school at Epsom Girls Grammar, and suddenly I was a very small fish in a very big pond.
So you were someone that stood out. If you say big fish, small pond.
Well, just in the sense that there were only there was one class for our year, you know. So once I got to Form 2. We were all big fish.
So everyone was going to say,
we were all big fish.
It was just too small of a pond for all the fish.
Exactly right. Right. So I felt like, you know, everyone in my year knew my name because they were all in my classroom. And then I went to Eggs, and it was just this big sprawling 1,600 students at the time. And everyone had come from these, because I grew up in a school that went from primary through intermediate.
Yeah, so you didn't even have that acclimatisation to here's a new world.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so all the other girls came from Epsom Normal Intermediate or Remuera Intermediate, and they had already done like their sporting codes and things. And so, you know, I'd go to think, oh, maybe I'll take up gymnastics, that'd be cool. And I'd go to the gym and people were flick-flacking up and down. I was like, okay, this is not where I'm going to be learning to do gym, clearly. And I really shrunk in high school a lot.
Right. So not an enjoyable time at high school.
I was quite academic. Yeah. I did fine at high school. There were other complicating factors in that. I got really involved in youth group and that during my teen years. So I basically became a giant nerd. Like
Christian-y kind of youth group? Wow.
Yeah, super
Who
Christian.
sold you that?
My oldest sister is a Christian, and she was one of the leaders. And there was a boy there that I quite fancied at the age of 13.
But also, just as an aside, I've reflected on that. I used to go to Christian camp called Kiwi Ranch, and sort of I went to one because friends at school really liked it, and then I didn't think about that. You think about things obviously in different contexts when you're older. I realise now that the reason Mum was just happy to write the cheque is because it's a week of your kid being looked after somewhere. But anyway, that was around. I reckon I went there on and off from about 11 through to about 14, and again it was early experiences of without getting into details, kind of girls but that every night was what is essentially the indoctrination session, but. The short point of telling you this story is I thought that's a really interesting age to try and capture people. It's sort of clever, but I don't know, a little bit untoward. Because when you're already really what the hell's going on?
If your goal,
where do I fit in? You know,
if your goal is to get people to sign up to the greater purpose, that's a great time to do it. When people are feeling vulnerable. You know, they're asking questions about their life and what's ahead because that's just the stage of life that they're at. Yeah. They're interested in the opposite sex, and here's a nice, safe place to be able to meet a bunch of people.
Yeah, that's right.
And I use the word safe extremely loosely. An apparently safe place to meet people.
Yeah.
And you know, but there's a community where that's the one sort of. I don't look particularly fondly back on those years for a variety of reasons, but. One of the things I will say is that you kind of do have this, to use a Christian term, fellowship with people who are potentially some of the cool kids and some of the, it's a real diverse mix of people.
Yeah, totally. I get that. And also, just nothing is ever black and white. The world is about greys. Not to knock on Christianity in general. My grandmother died this year, and she was with the Salvation Army, and I was thank you. I was that, in terms of what happened there, I was that is a healthy church response in action, that's, community and this, that and the other, and that's where we had the service. But back to you being a massive big nerd. Like, were you also like quite judgy in that Christian-y kind of youth groupy way?
Yeah, I totally was. So, I mean, I have some pretty dark stuff that happened during my time in the church, and a lot of it involved control and absorbing of indoctrination from people in power who I trusted, and so I was quite compared to like the sort of the mega churches of these days where everyone's very cool and I was very much like giant nerd judgy pants. I had this inner conflict.
It's like a precursor to SpongeBob. Giant nerd judgy pants. I don't know if we'll sell that one. Eh? Can I see a picture? Have you got a sketch there?
Theatre of the mind. Theatre of the mind, Lewis.
Yeah.
But the thing I think that I always wrestled with was that the bulk of my family, apart from this one sister, were not Christian in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wrestling with the fact that I loved them, but they were going to hell. Like that was how it was for me.
That's, right. Yeah, if you genuinely believe that, I guess that's a real concern.
Yeah.
This has gone very deep, very early. Normally, Western, it's good. It's good. I like it.
I'm quite an open person.
Yeah. And my interviewing skills have obviously improved vastly. So coming on out the other end of it, like, it's fascinating, having taught students for so many years now, you forget how many quite devout Christians there are. Comes up with students a lot. So by the time you got to the comms degree, were you still of that ilk? Or
no.
So what caused the sort of like light bulb moment, or the this isn't for me, or was it sort of a slow transition? How did you come on out of the what would we call it? The something McNerdy pants years?
I can't remember. It was only about 3 minutes ago. I came out of it via I had been in the church and stayed in the church because I'd started dating someone a lot older than me. And this is where I'm saying some of this dark stuff came in, right?
Yeah.
You can join the dots. And, And I think when I was about 17, I left school.
Yeah.
I left partway through my, what was then, 7th form year.
Yes.
Which is now, what, year 13?
I still have to get people to tell me. Yeah, I think so. I think it's 12 in Australia and 13 here or something like
really that. Really ageing ourselves here.
Yeah.
So I left partway through because back then it was 6th form certificate.
Yeah.
And bursary with the kind of the university entry qualifications.
Yeah.
And because I was only taking 4 bursary subjects instead of 5, because I was doing, I think, media studies or something as one of my 7th form subjects, which wasn't a bursary subject.
No, it would have been new and radical and odd.
Yeah, very strange. I quickly thought, oh no, what if the universities look at my total and don't sort of take into the account the fact that I did 4 subjects and then my average across those 4 is not as good, and because they think it's 5 subjects, and then I don't know, I did some gymnastics in my head, but I'd done really well in 6th form, so I was like, I'm just going to ride on my 6th form marks. I went and worked for a year. I couldn't figure out if I wanted to be a teacher or if I wanted to do something like comms, and I spent that year working and figuring out that I wanted to do comms.
But even then, you're great to talk to about this, because when did you do the comms degree? Because even that would have been quite a new degree then. Like my regular listeners will know, bore them to death, but I've talked about this a few times, that when I did uni, I was at uni like mid-90s, and I was in Wellington, obviously pre-internet. I didn't really look outside of Wellington. Like, I had no idea that a comms degree even existed then.
Yeah.
I think it had just started around then. Duncan Garner was in the first year of... Yeah. So you must have been early, right?
I must
When
have
did you
been.
start it?
My sister went through it before me, so that's how I became aware of it, and she majored in public relations, and so she must have been about 3 years ahead of me.
But you went... I'll put it this way. Did you go this century or last century?
Last century. I started in 1998, and I was the graduating year of 2000.
Because you surprised me with your age when we started. I'm like, okay, so you must have done... if you've only spent a year out of school, you must have done the comms degree quite early. Yep, 1998. Where were we? Why did I ask you that?
Why did I break it? So what was I like when I started?
Right. Thank you.
So by that stage...
This is another podcast host, folks.
I had broken off... my relationship with the church and this guy, and I had started dating people my own age, started smoking cigarettes and listening to secular music, and so it was quite a transformation over the
Grunge
course
hits.
of a
Oh my
year.
goodness. Yeah.
I was a real Britpop girl, and then so by the time I made it through to university, I had this opportunity, and it was AIT when I started as well.
Yeah, right.
It changed while I was there.
Wow. So you went to the Polytechnic because the original roots of that school is journalism was a trade, like being a mechanic
Yeah.
or whatever else. And yeah.
Yeah. And so, it was actually sort of an opportunity to reinvent myself coming out of this metamorphosis.
Not unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I had the best time.
So over the years, it sounds like you've come to find a nice middle ground because you went from I get it though, like reaction to that would be that. With my hands, folks, I'm going the extremes of one to the other. You wouldn't kind of end up middling. And how did you end up finding radio as a major? I mean, radio is obviously a much kind of bigger force then, right?
Yes, it was a big force. It was a huge force.
Yeah.
Especially
if you're into music.
Yeah, it was pre-Channel Z.
Yeah.
But only just.
Yeah.
And so you had your big guns were still like ZM was a big one.
Yeah.
Hauraki was huge then.
BFM was way
BFM,
huger then.
Yeah, BFM was really, really big and impactful. And I assume, I don't know, a lot can change in 1,000 years, but, you dabble in all the various different majors, and then I actually put down TV as my first major.
Yeah.
And radio is my second choice, and clearly I was not very good at TV, so I got into radio.
But then, as we'll talk about, you ended up in TV.
I know, it's
and then
radio's
also
actually-
people major in one thing there and they end up in another. It's not unusual.
I know. I've also worked in public relations in my time, and now podcasting. But the thing is, I think for me, radio was actually a much easier segue into television as a career
That's
than
interesting.
had I just gone straight, like trying to get a job in television straight out of university.
This is just on the spot, but I'm guessing that's because you wanted to be above the line in front of the camera, in front of the mic. So I get that would actually arguably prepare you just as well or better than doing screen, where the emphasis might be more on making stuff and being the crew. And
I did really enjoy working on on cameras and in the edit suites with the TV stuff as well. So I wouldn't say that I definitely... It's easy to say all this stuff in retrospect, like I say, radio was a great segue into TV for me.
Yeah.
Because I got really lucky, Yeah.
But
I found it easier to get like an on-air job in radio than I think it would be to come straight out of university and get an on-air job on television. But I didn't have any... I mean, I think I had this big dream that I wanted to be on like MTV in the UK one day, but I never really thought I was going to end up on any music TV. There wasn't really any music TV.
I have the same. I look back because I ended up doing a reasonably, profile radio job in Wellington for a while. And just all the things that, I don't know, I think do young people think broader than we do these days because they've got the whole world in a device in front of them? I don't know, but I'm the same. Like I never thought when I went for my OE to try and do this, that and the other. It just all seems, I don't know what I'm getting at is I don't know whether it's age and hindsight or the fact that all of that, the world just seemed so much bigger and more disconnected than that. It seemed like an impossibility, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I so remember when Trevor Plant...
Hi, Trevor. I know he'll listen to this.
I remember, Trev, when you stood up...
we're talking to him. Go on.
I'm talking to him directly. And
I'll tell you what I remember next, Trevor.
An intimate relationship with your listener, isn't it? It doesn't get much more intimate than that. But he stood up at we was basically selling the radio, or actually doing the opposite, because radio and TV were the limited number glory majors back in the day. I think there were like 14 places in each or something similar to that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people were vying for them. And so Trevor was almost trying to discourage an influx of applicants for the major by saying, if you think that you're going to come out of here with a job on air on a radio station, that's not going to happen. You're going to be working for free for a year down at Ski FM, if you're lucky, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
good advice.
It was good advice, but then I came out of that degree and ended up on air. So
totally.
Trevor, I just think you need to rewrite your speech. That's what I'm saying.
No, because you're an anomaly.
I know. I understand that. And it was a series of just really fortunate events. It wasn't.
No, it's got to be talent as well. I disagree with that. Like, I agree. I think it's timing. I think all of that, the universe, totally, absolutely, right place, right time. But I think, how to put this without, in just terms of thinking where I work and what I do, like in terms of the on-air stuff, I'm of the firm belief that there's an X factor that some people have and maybe other people don't. I think other people can get that if they work at it.
Yeah.
But I just think of a number of broadcasters or public figures that are just naturally good at it, and a number of them haven't been through that kind of training system.
But Lewis, I'll be perfectly frank with you.
Yeah.
Some people just don't have it.
Yeah.
And bless
That's the
you.
short version.
And like it's you've got to try it to know. But even now, we still have talent suggested by clients, or who we think are going to be great because they're an amazing big personalities that can get behind the mic, and they just don't have it behind the mic.
Here's a great one: Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen. Now, I've no idea of my expectations of Bruce Springsteen as a podcaster. I know he'd be a man who'd have some incredible stories. They teamed up and did a podcast together. I haven't listened to it, but what I've heard is like Obama, this great orator, just couldn't get the format. Just couldn't. And part of that I think is because he has to be so measured, and he's such a kind of brand and a thing in a way that he just wasn't suited to this kind of format.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Springsteen?
I don't know. Apparently, it was just terrible, and it was kind of shelved. We're going for a little aside now, but like the Meghan Markle show, maybe that's great. I mean, I'm sure some of these people can do it. This is not really related to what you're talking about, but it kind of is. I know that Trevor, this is actually quite funny. None of you will get a job on the mic. I know he didn't hire you to be on the mic, did he?
No, not at first.
He hired you to make content.
Yeah, so actually before that I did get a job on air. My very first radio job was on air, and it was while I was still completing my degree. There was a station that TRN, which is now NZME, back in the day, the radio network had a station called 96.1, and it was an alternative radio station. It was kind of their answer to BFM, but it was pretty low frequency. There were announcers on air quite irregularly. And I don't even really know how I ended up with that role. I know there was another comms student who went before me who was the, I don't even remember what they're called now, like the station voice. And, so I don't know if it was through
station voice.
I don't know if it was through her or someone else, but no, I know who it was through. See, this is how random it is. I was working at Sterling Sports to help pay my way through university, which, if anyone who knows me is already shocked by this information purely because of the kind of store it is. And there was a guy called Vaughan, and I can't remember his surname, but he used to come in and do the More FM live crosses because Sterling Sports were a client of More FM. So he'd come in and do come down to Sterling Sports, St. Luke's got some great specials on today, right?
That's how these happen, man. And you said, hey, I'm doing radio or something like that.
Yeah, he actually, through him, a friend of his was a friend of someone else's, it turned out to be Matt Headland, and he was program directing 96.1. So they were like, hey, they gave him my number, he got in touch, and I went on air with 96.1. It was only for a few months, but it was my first proper.
Do you remember it being more terrifying than just being in the static studio and being in the AET studio, or just
it was probably smaller than the static studio.
Right,
it was very much.
No, but some people. I've heard from people. When you say people turn on the mic and they freeze.
Yeah.
I've heard people talk about it over the years, and the general thing is that it's that. The thing that comes into their head is like, oh my God, there's thousands of people listening. That's where the paralysis is. Oh, that's good.
I think there was no paralysis because there were not thousands of people listening. So, so it was actually a really lovely little way in, a nice soft landing. And then from there, once I graduated, yes, Trevor offered me a job doing producing a couple of New Zealand on air funded radio shows, one for The Edge and one for Channel Z.
Yeah.
Channel Z had started at this time, and I did my internship at Channel Z, so I was also... I did my internship at More FM, and I got pulled upstairs to Channel Z by that station voice person from 96.1.
Vaughan somebody?
No, this was Lauren Whitney.
Okay.
I know, she sort of rescued me, and I landed a producing job on Channel Z while someone had glandular fever, and then ended up, when ended up on like having
this is a very
weekend show.
forensic description.
I know.
What did the walls look like? Sorry, anyway.
Essentially, I was... No, look, I'm just telling the story. I'm the one usually asking other people questions, so when I get a chance to talk about myself...
Hey, listen, the last guy, we spent 3 hours, we did it in 2 parts. I'm not kidding. There's a 2-part episode up. So
I'm sorry. This is... Okay.
You just wind her up and she goes.
All of that to say, I was working with Trevor on producing those, and on the weekends I was doing Channel Z.
Great. Now, Channel Z, for those who don't know, around the mid-90s, they started in Wellington. They were kind of a bridge between, I guess, commercial radio and arguably what student radio was doing. I know in Wellington, because Active was quite dubby and quite dancey, they kind of counter-program with kind of like alternative rock, say Britpop, all of that stuff coming through. What everyone needs to remember is commercial radio there was arguably way more conservative than what it plays. Like, I know it doesn't play a range of artists now, but there was a lot of stuff that just kind of wasn't getting played. So it was the kind of hip kid on the block. Then by the time you got there, it was nationwide. The Ice TV guys, John and Nathan, were like, that was a really well-known youth. Right, so you kind of landed right place, right time, right?
Right place, right time.
So what are your memories of Channel Z? Was it formative, or am I talking it up too much?
No, it was really formative.
Great.
And I think anyone who has memories of Channel Z as a listener will tell you that it was just like the best.
Yeah.
Played some shockingly bad music,
Yeah.
but it played some really great music as well.
That's what you want. I like that, I hate that. I like that, yeah.
And John and Nathan had the Dick 84 breakfast show, and that was the show that I produced for 6 weeks. So that was such a good
and nice guys to work with too. You know what I mean? Like, speaking of that era and people, and they're good
great.
people.
So and these two guys were magic on air. Like, they had that magic in a bottle that you can't train in someone, and you certainly can't train in a duo, where they would finish each other's sentences. One of them would start off on a train of thought on something, and they obviously knew where they were going, and the other person would click in and then sort of start playing along, even though they didn't know where, it hadn't been made implicit.
It's like theatre sports, don't block. Just
they would just, and it was just magic to watch, and that really actually informed a lot of the way that I thought about on-air talent and what is good on-air talent. They're like a good touchstone for me. Yeah. Even from way back then.
And so you're producing them. How do you end up doing a show there, or do you end up doing a show there?
Yeah, I did. I know, again, it's all just complicated. The short version of the story is that there was the nationwide networking happened, and jobs had to be offered. I was being lined up for breakfast producer full time, but jobs had to be offered to staff who were being made redundant in other cities. And at that point, she's Mel Riddler now, I can't remember her name, but she went by Hot Mel. That was her sort of radio name. These were different times.
Oh my God, it's such a small world. Riddler, did you say?
Yeah.
So Dave Riddler married Hot Mel.
Dave Riddler was the PD at the time, and I remember him saying, "I'm so sorry, Joan, we really want to give you this job, but we've got to go." And Hot Mel, she's coming up to do it. Of course, he
and I think she's really hot. So
he didn't know that at the time, but he was going to marry her. But they gave me a Sunday show that was playing new music, and then I was just a permanent fill-in person when people went away. So I had like quite a lot of time on here.
Yeah.
And then still doing this other stuff with Trevor on the side.
And then was it just kind of being in that environment and, obviously the profile of being on air that led to television, or is that another shoe store? Actually, probably by then you're of a means where you could leave the shoe store, right?
I wasn't at the shoe store anymore, but this was a very traditional way into television. Was I auditioned for a role on a new music channel that was coming to TVNZ TV2, Channel 2, and it was in the middle of the night. It ran from midnight till 6 in the morning. And
was that M2?
That was M2.
I like to always ask guests, where are we now? What sort of date are we? Early 2000s?
We are in 2001 because we launched on September 11th, 2001.
Ah, right.
Not a lot of eyes.
I don't even know how to. It's not often I'm stuck for words. I can't think of a response to that. Yeah, not a lot of people on set would have been.
So it was September.
You're lucky no one had devices. The whole set would have just stopped.
Our September 11 was September 10.
Yeah.
So we didn't launch exactly on September. Okay. We were a day ahead. So But obviously the date's stuck in my mind.
Sure.
And we certainly would have had not very many viewers for the first, A, for the fact we were running in the middle of the night, and B, because there was much bigger news happening at the time.
See, I was away from New Zealand at that time, and so I was thinking when I read about your TV career, like later on, you were definitely in that, like with C4, which we'll get to, you're in that kind of heyday of, the way I see it, of those kinds of shows. But what was TVNZ up to in 2001, programming when did it start? 11 or 12 at night? Was it just they needed content to fill it, or were there people there pushing for like stuff like this to happen?
They were making a money grab for New Zealand On Air.
Oh, okay, right. Did you know that back then?
I mean, I think that I probably didn't know it as well as
Was
I do
was
now.
it just like, was it like a VJ show, like you playing videos and chatting?
Yeah, so it was put
Was it
together.
quite loose? Like, could you be just kind of, was it sort of like public access TV, or was it really slick and highly produced?
I would argue it's much more highly produced than
Yeah.
public access television, but no, we were very much responsible for our own voice breaks and that kind of thing. I don't remember.
Man, that sounds so fun.
Ear checks and that
Did you
kind of
feel
thing.
like it was like, wow, this is quite an extraordinary thing to have landed doing?
Oh, of course. And it was
2001 in television. I mean,
I know.
yeah.
No,
yeah.
it's amazing. And we were very much the Channel Z to Max TV's BFM. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that's a great.
So
That's
Max,
a great.
Max
Yeah, yeah.
TV. I'm not sure. I think it actually finished up around this time, and then Thane Kirby started Alt TV a short while after. But it was we were kind of a bit slicker, probably a bit more commercial. We were definitely not as cool as Max TV and not as loose as Max TV, but we also had like probably a bit more money to
And
play
also,
with.
like the whole thing of it, especially when you're young, you feel it more like people. There's those camp. You'd have those alty people kind of like snubbing their nose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it really led to a lot of things again, because from there we had a chat room. You know, this was back in the day of the chat room. So people would go on in the middle of the night and they'd go into a chat room and all
Yeah.
chat with each other while they're watching the telly. And as hosts, we'd get in there and chat with them as well.
Like that's really, really new. Being able to interact with TV people in real time. I mean, when I used to watch What Now,
Yeah.
you'd have to send a
letter.
stamped self-addressed envelope to PO Box whatever it was, Christchurch. And
I think it'd be a private bag for What Now, the volume of
wait
mail.
for weeks. That's exciting. And so, what was the response? I mean, I know it's midnight TV, but like we're saying, this is such off-told tale on any podcast about media, but there weren't many options, right? For if you wanted to engage with media, so I'm sure people were watching it.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. So when did you start to feel that and notice that? In other words, when did people start spotting you and noticing you in public?
I can't really recall. I mean,
And how did you find that? I found having a degree of fame in my small city and being so young, it actually affected me in ways I didn't realise back then. Yeah. So were you bothered by being... No, that's nice.
No,
Good
I
to
wasn't
know.
overly recognised. I think
Yeah.
I was recognised to a level at which it was just really nice to know people were watching.
Yeah,
you know?
it's affirming.
Yeah.
And also, like, for whatever, you can say you're making art, this, that and the other thing, it's for audiences. We want an audience.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know... that was like my time when I did some time on Base FM. I was like, well, I'm doing radio, but this is the least I've ever felt like I've got an audience.
Yeah,
I tell you what, when the phone stopped ringing on radio, that was a big change when everyone started texting.
Yeah, I think we used to go to like Big Day Out and have our M2 tent, or a
Yeah.
Channel Z tent or wherever
Those
I was
are the
working at
affirming
time.
days,
Yeah,
yeah.
because people they come up and they want to meet you and get photos with you and stickers and sign my hat and all this kind of stuff, and it's
Yeah.
really cool. And I love connecting
Yeah,
with an
that's great.
audience.
And was it do you remember, was it a living wage doing just that show back then? Was there enough purse that was your job?
Now I was also.
I'd
I
left
just
the shoe
remembered.
shop.
I have left the shoe shop at this point, but I remembered I also was producing Bomber's late night talk show on
Oh, yeah.
Channel Z. Which I don't really want to talk about.
No, I just went, oh yeah, anyway.
Yeah, say no more. Dark times, and then I was also when I think it's the same time I was doing M2, or maybe immediately after M2 shut down, I got a job within the same production company, which was Satellite Media. I took over from Francesca Rudkin on Squeeze, which was a New Zealand music half-hour show.
This was actually crafting, I mean, it's all a craft, but this was actually involved research, and
Yes.
you were making short documentaries about New Zealand music,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And it was just...
I mean, that sounds awesome even now
It
as
was.
a gig,
It was
right?
so much fun, but it was also like right at the height. I mean, I'm so out of the game now that I don't...
What's the game?
Someone might tell you The New Zealand music game.
Oh, yeah, I'm the
Someone
same.
might tell you that right now is the height of New Zealand music, but back then it was in the mainstream big time. I think the thing with New Zealand music at that time was that there weren't a lot of international touring artists coming through. So, if, the epitome of a music experience is going to see your favourite band play their new album live, and you could do that with local bands because they'd be on the stages all the time, And so the New Zealand music scene was extremely vibrant. It was really celebrated. New Zealand Music Month meant something.
It had gone from being a wasteland to New Zealand music, commercial radio didn't really play New Zealand music till the late 90s,
No, and then there were the 20% quotas came in as well of local content that the pop stations would put on in the middle of the night, or they'd just play the same Brooke Fraser song 50 million times in a day. But for stations like Channel Z, who were already reaching that quota, they were really championing New Zealand music anyway. And it was just, it was an amazing time to work in New Zealand music television, highlighting New Zealand music and just meeting the musicians and spending time with them, and it was really, really
and
cool.
what about
very privileged.
What about the practice and the craft of it? Like I love, maybe love's a strong word. I'm interested in those projects where the turnover just means that you're forced to make something, say, every week or whatever. Like, in other words, it's a very long way of saying, like, how often did you have to produce a doco, and was it quite a sort of big production process? Because there's a lot to putting a story together, right? Or was it more like a 7 Sharp kind of style? I've never seen it.
No,
so,
it was somewhere in between those two.
It was half an hour doco. So after ads in the old world, 22 minutes maybe.
22 to 24 minutes of actual TV, and it was a pretty small team. There was like a producer, a director, and me. And then we were the ones sort of working full time on it, and then there were contract camera people and soundies who would come in for the actual shoot days. So we
were
would put
you
out,
researching the story?
Yeah. I was host researcher.
Great, amazing.
And I wrote all the voiceover scripting. Like I'd sit in on the edits and that kind of thing as well. So it was definitely. I benefited a lot from it being in a small production because it meant that I was able to upskill in a lot of ways.
If you were doing it these days, you'd have just your own camera. You'd probably just be you and one person signing it off, right?
Totally, and it would be going on YouTube, not linear television.
And so, what were some of the highlights? So, like the ones that you particularly enjoyed making, or the ones that you went, "That's a great story," or "That's a great piece of TV," or "That was just really funny," or
it was always great doing something with Shehad because
they're lovely guys. They're kind of old friends.
Yeah, and they were, they were really big, and they had this interesting.
I'm going to see Carl this weekend.
I'll say hi from me.
I will.
And then, but no, the one episode that really sticks in my mind was this amazing ep we did with Booger Beasley. He just was so we got so much more out of him. He was very vulnerable and candid and just shared his home and life and cars with us. Talked about some really dark stuff that went on with Head Like a Hole, and it was kind of. I guess, Shehad went in one trajectory and Head Like a Hole. They both came up together. I don't know you remember it well.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah. They both there were sets of decisions and circumstances and whatever that made them go very different directions. Yeah. And so you caught him like I had this with a podcast guest, like I was saying to you, the one that ended up being 3 hours. Is what you just described as like sometimes it's just you don't know at all, but it's right place, right time for the person or the people that you're getting involved.
Yeah.
So he just obviously needed to do that at the time, right?
I just don't think anyone had asked. Like honestly, that was the thing. I think he would have been.
People say that. You hear people say that as a response. You hear people saying there's responses in interviews and stuff. Hey, oh my god, no one's ever asked that. Yeah. And then they just I
just think that he had been out of the public eye for such a long time, and and we were doing these. Profiles, we'd quite often do kind of like it wouldn't necessarily be obvious to the viewer, but we would have like a plan of like we're going to do X many profiles or we're going to do a festival or, and it was one of the more profile-y ones. And it felt like magic TV.
So once a week?
Once a week for like 35 weeks of a year. So
how many years?
I did it for 3.
Wow. And are any of them still online on New Zealand Sound and Vision or anything like that? Or on New Zealand Screen?
I think there's one on New Zealand on screen.
So when did it end?
It ended in 2004. At the end of 2004.
And then did you go straight into, this is probably arguably the most high profile of them, C4? Because it started off just a music channel, right? So it's Channel 4 that... No. Anyway, this is getting into the weeds a bit. I think Channel 4 started off as general programming, but music was... It was partly NTV kind of vibe to it, right?
No, the MTV kind of vibe came later, I think.
That later.
Yeah.
So anyway, so did you kind of leave that show and then end up on C4?
Yeah, and again...
My goodness, Jane.
I know. I was
one
really
door
lucky.
opens, another closes.
I remember I took another job at Satellite. They when Squeeze didn't get funding again, I took another job like doing multimedia stuff. It was just when phones started to have some weird internet thing happening on it, and I was working on like a Vodafone project through Satellite Media, and I think I'd worked on it for a week when I had Andrew Schusterman and Leanne Borrett from C4 say they wanted to take me for lunch, and they would whisk past and pick me up in private, and they took me to Vulcan Lane, and we had a secret meeting, and they said, Jackie Brown's leaving.
Oh, wow.
Do you want to, would you consider? And I was like, yes, I would.
That's a sensible replace. That's, right. Yeah.
And then,
Have you met Jackie over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Our kids have been at the same school. No, Jackie's amazing.
Yeah. That TV show she did is just criminally underrated. It's such a clever New Zealand TV show.
Which one? She's done a few.
The self-titled one.
How do you pronounce
that word? Eponymous. The eponymous one.
Yeah, The Secret Diaries of Jackie Brown.
Yeah, I just thought that was so
great.
So great.
It was ahead of its time is the problem.
Yeah. I'd like to go and see it. Yeah, I'd like to see it again. Yeah.
Or The Diaries of Jackie Brown. Maybe not The Secret. Whatever. It was The Diaries of Jackie Brown, I think. But anyway, they pulled me in to do an audition with Clark.
Yeah.
And then, so I did that, a screen test, and I drove probably 3 minutes down the road when I got a call from just to say, we want you, which was amazing. I just left the building.
That's amazing. And like the reason I often ask guests, like I did before about the living wage, is one of my interests over the years is like the kind of gig economy, and like when you finally get that, okay, fuck, I've got a job that, but often, especially with public facing roles, people think you're doing really well. I remember I was doing breakfast radio at one stage for $150 a week, did C4 give you a living wage?
Put it this way, the Vodafone bloody flip phone bits of New Zealand music written content I was doing.
Yeah. My voiceover, I used to do professional voiceover as well as doing the Brekkie show.
Yeah.
I go in 40 minutes hungover after the breakfast show, and they'd go invoice us for $1,500.
I know. So
in the 90s, right?
That job that I did for a week that was going to be a full-time, permanent contract, paid much less than C4 did. But the opportunities through C4 were obviously fantastic.
Yeah, I relate totally. And but the thing is that, preaching to the choir, is that it's having that exposure and that profile and people knowing what you're doing that actually gets you those other gigs. So you'd argue that without that, there wouldn't be that. So you're at C4, as promised. You can hit one of those top 6 buttons there.
Anyone?
Yeah, not the bottom 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jane Yee, and when I'm not on C4, my radio is always tuned into Static 88.1 FM.
Well, that's a lie. But anyway, so you must have come back and talked to the students at some stage.
I must have done.
I knew these wouldn't be a very good narrative tool because they're just radio stings at the end of the day, but try another one.
Okay, this is fun.
Let's see if we get anything out of these.
Hi, I'm Jane Yee from C4. When I'm not hungover, which is most of the time,
that's a bit
I'm
more telling.
listening to Static.
No, I said when I'm not hungover, which is most of the time because I don't really drink, so most of the time I'm not.
No,
hungover.
I didn't hear that. Hang on.
Hi, I'm Jane Yee from C4. When I'm not hungover, which is most of the time.
Okay.
So it pays to listen.
Yeah, but you see, you painted a different picture of yourself as... kind of these, as I say, there's not really anything to these, but now I want to.
Hi, I'm Jane Yee from C4, and I started out life in this big media music world right here on Static 5 years ago when we didn't have all the flash computers that they do today. Good on ya.
It must be fun coming back. I look. Hey,
I don't even remember doing these. I mean,
That's right.
It's bringing back memories of being wheeled in by the.
How would you remember? But I was going to say,
much I don't remember.
I love if someone's doing something and students know them and they come back in. Honestly, that's such an enjoyable week to do those. So good on you.
I've had to beg you now.
Good on you for paying it back.
Now I'm like emailing you guys, going, "Can I come in?
Yeah.
Can I come and talk to your students?
Actually, that's
please?
true. That's how you're sitting. That's how you're sitting here.
I was on TV 20 years ago.
Right, I was on TV 20 years ago. Yeah. Oh my God.
When you said you'd found some static things, I thought you meant from when.
Oh no, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Although, to Matt's credit, it was probably actually Andrew Dubber who led this thing when you were there. But anyway, Matt's the head of radio now. To his credit, he said to me, don't wipe anything, don't have them wipe anything, and I get it now. It's like it's all just there in the hard drive, so I don't know how far it goes back, but I'm guessing this system wouldn't go back that far.
No, we were the first year after reel-to-reels.
C4?
Yeah.
How long were you there?
I was there for 3 years.
Yeah.
The best part of 3 years. Yeah, I was doing video shows, and then we had so Clark and I, alongside a guy called Joel DeFries, were the only full-time presenters. The other people.
Do we say Clark now like we say Prince or Madonna? Because I think I know who you mean by Clark. You mean the first man.
The first man, Clark Gayford. Yeah. So we were the...
He's always struck me as a lovely guy. Yeah.
He is, but like I know things. Because it was a different time, and we were young and we were working in music TV and it was fun. I want to say on the record, never had a romantic relationship with Clark Gayford, okay?
I can say on the record that I was on very strong ecstasy with him once in Gisborne.
That is not surprising at all. Anyway, so Clark and I and Joel did Select Live, which was a request show every day, Monday to Friday for a few hours. I was going to say after school, but that's the fact of the matter. And then Clark and I we'd alternate hosting a show called Homegrown, which was a New Zealand music show, and we also would host like another sort of 1 hour show somewhere in the week. But the main thing that we worked on was a show called Special Features, which was on a Friday night, and it was kind of a magazine style show. So we'd do links in the studio that were pre-recorded, but we'd throw to like little packages that we'd made where we were going out to, I don't know, race a car around.
And looser than arguably a little bit more stuffy TVNZ. Was that a bit more student radio or?
No, this was much more.
Actually, no, it's Can West, so it's actually
This was slick. This was pretty slick. It was
slick.
Yeah. There was quite a lot of work involved in putting the show together, but it was very much. Again, Clark and I out with a camera person. Like that was it.
You've alluded to the different era in terms of people's social responsibilities and attitudes towards each other. Don't want to get too far down there, but I read some hilariously gendered kind of writing about you. Nothing nasty or whatever, but. Yeah, it was a different era.
Read it.
Something like I didn't write it down. Something like there was a press release for you coming to C4, and it was something like she's so small and cute, and we can't wait till she's in the office next week.
I was a pocket rocket. Is what I was.
But this is like the head of it was Angie Schuster. It was someone like that sending that release, and it's like it's of the era. Like it was just super. Like I know. As I say, it's context wise, it's just what it was. But it made me realize how far we've all come. That I read that and like almost cracked up at it on the spot, whereas I probably wouldn't have 10 years ago.
The terrifying thing is that in 20 years' time, we'll look back at things that are being said now and go, "Oh, it's so good." This is a whole other conversation
in terms of like cancelling people for stuff 20 years. Anyway,
yeah.
And what did you learn at C4 was so far? Because we've got to get to Blimmin' Spin-off shortly. What's the sort of most enjoyable one of all of those quite varied and exciting gigs?
Oh, look, I'd have to say there was different things about each one were amazing because, M2 was my first, and so that was super exciting because I was literally a nobody with no experience at that point.
Yeah, that is exciting.
And then Squeeze was my own show. Like I was the only one fronting that. So
and
that
you were
cool.
And you were researching and creating it and storyboarding it. Yeah.
And then C4 was just like it was the biggest audience out of all of those, and it was it was arguably where I became the most well known.
And that's probably the one where you get the most like invites to gigs
things.
And parties, and you're on the list for everything.
Yeah.
And that era, I feel like there was a lot. Maybe it's because I'm just totally not in that world now. But I feel like there was more of that now. And back to the wage thing, I always thought of that as the trade-off. Like, I just get to go to everything, and it's really easy, and kind of generally treated pretty well.
Yeah. I got a free PSP when I went to the launch of the PlayStation Portable.
Yeah, I love the way I've thought about that. Like, I had no, not that you do, like, no kind of retirement money or put away or anything like that. But I got a free pair of Adidas and someone else pays for them.
Exactly.
I'm cracking it.
I was sponsored by Converse, who I wore because I wore Chuck Taylors exclusively all the time.
Yeah.
They came to me and were like, "Hey, we see you wearing our shoes. We'd like to provide them for you if you continue to do so."
Are you familiar with the Hardcore Warehouse that used to do all the different clothing brands? You used to be able to go out
No.
there and they'd assign you a brand and you'd just go and pick whatever you wanted off the racks. And it was
Yeah.
like Mossimo, this is very of the era, a bit earlier, Mossimo, Storcy,
Mooks.
Echo, Mooks.
Yeah.
Right, so I had Mooks once and then Split and just come home and that was, those are two standout
But the
days.
most, not scandalous, but the most amazing
know
stat
whether-
that came out of this Converse thing was that the Decepticons were all sponsored by Converse also for 26 pairs a year.
Wow.
It's
And what
a
did you
new
get,
pair every
2?
2 weeks. Well, no, they said that I could have as much as I wanted, but I think I probably got maybe 10 over the whole time. Like, I'm talking like
Bloody
over
cost
several
it for about
years.
$1.80 in China. What's going on? So, shoes. Yes, it's like those comedians or even rappers or whatever that request a brand new pair of kicks and a bunch
Yeah.
of socks for every gig. Nothing like. Honestly, when
Nothing
you
like
put
a
brand new
new-
socks on,
yeah.
it's almost better than the shoes.
I have to say, though, it is a weird kind of byproduct of being given a lot of free stuff that I never... I didn't have a sense of my own style because I just wear whatever people sent me. And when I stopped being on TV and people stopped sending me things, I was like, didn't know how to shop.
No, but then also you end up... oh, my God, this is so funny. You also end up with... because it's a weird thing to relate to, like you end up with a bunch of stuff that you suddenly go, oh my God, all my clothing's really old all at once.
Yeah.
Stuff's not coming in. The main one was T-shirts. In this industry, like anything around music or entertainment or media, seems like everyone does a T-shirt
Yeah.
for everything. So having to buy T-shirts was a wake-up call.
I still struggle with
I wanna
T-shirts.
play-
Thank God for
hang
Ace
on, wait,
Colour.
hang on.
Hello, this is Jane Yee from C4. I know that you probably wanted Clark here, and you just got stuck with me. Sorry about that. In fact, I can tell you he's a lot shorter in real life, so you're better off anyway. Thanks for listening to Static. What a great station, eh?
That's a good thing.
I feel like that sting applies right now. Like you probably would have, if you had the choice between me and Clark Gayford, I don't think I'd be here right now. But you're stuck with me, and I'm shorter in real life too.
Yeah. So in 2012, I think... well, no.
I have a baby.
Have a baby. Was that...
I'm no longer in TV at this point. I got a job. I quit.
dropped out of the public eye?
I dropped out. I had pretty bad mental health issues going on.
Hey, now with that, I was like, I saw that you were on a TV campaign and I thought, wow, that's unusual of the era. And then you followed up with this, I thought, interesting take on it, which was exactly that. Like, you were basically like, I've kind of ended up the face of mental health. I'm sure that you don't regret doing that. I think it's great that you did that. But that reflection really interested me. Was it a bit difficult at first, kind of like having done the campaign? Like, in other words, were you judged unfairly, or was there any odd kind of fallout from it?
No, not at all. I mean,
Okay.
the thing is, I actually did the campaign. I'll talk about this. Like, I had 2 suicide attempts in my 20s.
Yeah, right.
And so it was a campaign that meant something to me. And they approached a bunch of people at the time
Yeah.
who were relevant to youth and on TV and radio and so on. And we did this. They launched this website called The Lowdown, and it was the equivalent of the John Kirwan campaign, but for young folk. And we myself and Dave Gibson from LMNOP were. This was very high tech, the internet at the time. We were like the navigators on the website where we were like these actual moving people going, you want to go here?
Oh my
You want to go
God,
there?
I can so picture it. It's so of the era. Yeah.
And then a few years later, they did a follow-up campaign with myself and Francis Cora from Cora, and that
Yeah.
was a TV campaign.
Yeah.
Oh, and there was one with Angelo from the Bleeders as well, which was also a TV campaign. So yes, I was this consistent kind of face for years, but during those times, I was having really difficult times. So that was, a lot of my 20s was, so I was leading this from the outside extremely fun, amazing life, but there were internal pressures.
Again, not unusual, but yeah, again, I just, kudos, because at least now you can, at my work, you can, within reason, kind of say you're having a mental health day and blah, blah, blah. So it's very, very different now. But,
yeah.
And I've had a guest on the podcast, even just being in your 20s is not, I think, and I think people think younger people are more open and stuff now, but I don't know if I buy that. I think it still takes a while to kind of like coming up with stuff. And I've talked about with people on the podcast who I last seen 20 years ago, and they tell me all this stuff, and I go, wow, you were just as fucked up as I was at the time.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? It's amazing what we carry around in our heads.
Totally.
Slightly different to the clinical depression you described, but I mean more that it's just hard negotiating being a young person.
Yeah, it is. It's
Especially
really
when
hard.
when you're doing kind of public-facing stuff and all the rest of it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much sort of falling apart behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I guess at some point there was, I felt under pressure, I guess, being in the public eye. But also, speaking to this sort of earning money thing, I do remember Can West put a freeze on. I feel like whenever I worked in media, they've always been in trouble. So there was constantly no one's getting pay rises. There's a pay freeze on and so on.
Yeah.
And I had put in a request for
Some
a pay
CEO
rise.
putting on a little mini golf green in his office. Anyway.
I'd put in a request for a pay rise and it had been rejected. And I asked them to reconsider. And I said, look, I don't know if I'll come back if I don't get this. Not because I'm money hungry, because it wasn't much of a pay rise. I was like, it's more.
No, it's just a
more the
recognition.
principle.
Yeah.
And they called my bluff, and I said, "Well, okay, I'm gonna
Good on you.
leave." But it wasn't just that; it was also because I had been struggling in my personal life.
Well, that's where we started with that aside. Totally,
Yeah.
I get it.
So it was sort of a big sort of. It was a big time in my life, and I was kind of had some regrets maybe that I'd made the wrong decision and so on. But ultimately, I'm happy with the decision I made, and I was offered a job out of the blue at Universal Music in promotions, and so that was the next 5 years of my life.
I actually don't know how people grind through like long term, and again those really public media roles. And what's just sprung to my mind now is, Will Smith popping at the Oscars. It's like it's a lot. It's completely different stakes and world and thing altogether.
Yeah, but thank you for comparing my level of success to Will Smith.
But it's about the public knowing of you, and So, dick move on his part. Apparently, Chris Rock's better for it now, though. But yes, you did have a baby in 2012.
Yes.
And I thought that was why you'd moved on out of I thought you'd moved out of the workforce after finishing C4. So in that case, I don't really have a question about your son, who must be 10 now. But
he is 10. He is.
His name's Victor, folks. I do my research.
Yeah, his name's Victor. He's named after my father, his grandfather, and he is really into gaming.
But never one to lose a point or a topic if it doesn't fire off well for me to begin with. I can follow up with the fact that then you ended up with 2 kids in your belly, which sounds way more of a thing to deal with. But that was quite a few years later, right?
Oh, no, it was 2.5
years later. So in other words, sorry, just to simplify this, folks, you found out you're having twins.
Yes.
Discuss.
Wasn't on purpose.
Well, who has twins on purpose?
Oh, well, maybe people who have IVF. And
I think rich people could do that. I want 7, please.
Yeah. No.
I want 3 girls, 2 boys. 5 boys, hang on.
3 children wasn't the number we were going for.
Yeah. You wanted a nice nuclear family.
Yeah.
Simpsons, like...
Actually, after my first, after Victor, I had a miscarriage, and then I didn't know. It's such an emotional toll that takes on you that I was like, if we don't get pregnant within X amount of time,
fuck it.
Just no more.
Yeah.
So we went from like going, we'd like to, okay, if we have 1, now we've got 3. That's kind of how it went. And so I had a little boy and a little girl.
But even you discussing like this cracked me up. Must be one of the few surviving blogs of yours on stuff. By the way, very of the era that you had a blog on stuff.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the blog. I won an award for that. My only award I ever won was for best online commentary at the Canon Media Awards. Like that's no small thing.
But this really struck me, especially as a male. Well, it must be a very good one. Tandem breastfeeding, and I just thought, listen to me, like what a most in the field kind of non-theoretical reality of because I've talked to friends, female women, about breastfeeding in general, and it's completely different what you're expecting, but just the physicality of having 2 kids and the fatigue of it, and we're not going to talk about breastfeeding. My point is that just the practical reality of 2 of everything.
Yeah.
I don't know what to ask about this. Did you end up reaching out to other parents with twins or whatever, or do you just kind of...
Yeah, it's surprising when you get pregnant with twins how you...
hang on, wait a minute. So what if they'd been first? At least you had the test run. Look, you'd been a mother. I
did have the test run, but it also turned out that first baby is autistic. So we had... we had, I had an autistic, I didn't know it at the time, but an autistic toddler.
Yeah.
And twins and a partner who was travelling overseas a lot. And
Yeah.
it led to another breakdown ultimately. But it was a lot, but worth it. They're amazing.
Are they identical?
No, so boy and a girl. So
Yeah.
they can't be identical if they're a boy and a girl.
I learned something then.
But they're not really anything alike, to be honest.
That's
Very much just
interesting.
siblings,
Yeah.
Siblings born at the same time.
Was this coming to the spin-off coming out of looking after young kids for that period of time?
Not really. I was out of a job. I was very busy, but
Yeah.
I wasn't in the workforce as it's generally coined between 2012 and 2020. I did a bit of freelance stuff here and there. I did a bit of writing. I did a bit of this, that, and the other. But the one thing that I did do was when my friend Duncan Grieve started up a silly little TV blog called The Spin-Off. And
Oh, you're already mates.
I've known Duncan since I was at AUT.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, it's
Because he
true.
came back as a sort of an older student, didn't he? Because he had a kid young.
No, it wasn't. No, he was like, yeah, he's younger than me.
Oh no, he came back and did postgrad. Anyway, sorry.
He's younger than me. He was at university studying whatever he was studying, can't remember. But it was actually through Sam Ackerman, who was also in my radio degree.
Yeah.
Did he do radio? Did Sam do radio?
Sorry,
no, I don't
to your
think he
main
did.
point.
You're moving me along.
Yeah.
I sat next to this guy, Sam,
For
in
your
a
benefit,
lecture.
not mine.
In a lecture one time.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a flat, and he had a room going, and he was friends with Duncan because they went to school together, and
Yeah.
I became friends with Duncan and have been ever since.
There's people who kind of dabble, and then there's kind of hardcore listeners. Like, were you a dabbler or a hardcore listener? Like, were you kind of into podcasting before you took the job, or you just kind of went, oh, it kind of relates to the radio I've done?
I was a dabbler, but I loved The Bachelor US, and I listened to a Ringer podcast that recapped it. And it wasn't The Ringer then, it was Grantland, but I was obsessed. And then when The Bachelor NZ was announced and Duncan had this website that he'd launched, I was like, we should do a podcast recapping The Bachelor NZ. And so was born The Real Pod. Then it was known as The Fantasy Suite. And so that's been going since 2015, and arguably one of probably the country's longest running podcasts. Like, original, not radio first kind of repackaged audio. Yeah. And then I went and lived in the States for a little bit in 2019. COVID happened. We came back. We were supposed to go back to the States. That didn't happen. And I remember ringing up Duncan while we were in lockdown and saying, mate, you've launched some good podcasts there, but you need to do something with them, because if you don't, someone else is going to. And
I think the spin-off's the perfect kind of spot between... like the big media companies and just all of people like me kind of doing them in their front room.
Yeah, like you don't have the red tape of the media companies, but you've got a little bit of push and you've got a platform to be able to promote them on.
And related to this, everyone is obviously it's a growth area of media, and there's not many of those these days.
Yeah, and I just very much felt that I loved what the Ringer was doing in the US, and I felt like the spin-off had an opportunity here to do it quicker than anyone else did, and that it wasn't going to be long before podcast was really taken off in New Zealand, but they were really well placed to be kind of leaders in that space.
That's interesting. So you pitched the role to him. That's great.
Yeah,
I thought you responded to a sort of an ad or something.
No,
yeah.
No. And he said, "Okay, cool. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "No, that wasn't what I'm saying." But then I did, and I started off 10 hours a week, which is to basically reshape the whole network and sort of try and cut stuff loose that wasn't really working and come up with new developments, and then it's sort of crept up. Now I'm doing 30 hours a week, and we've got a full-time engineer, and we've got someone else starting shortly, and it's still a very small team that relies a lot on talent from within the spin-off, but we've got some really big plans, and we've been investing in our gear and all that kind of thing, and making sure we've got a purpose-built studio, and we're really happy with what we've done.
I'm aware of the need to get you out of here, and it feels nice. It feels like we're coming to a natural conclusion. I was actually, the last bit of my plan was to drill you about reality TV and the state of it at the moment, but that sounds more like I'm doing the episode of The Fold or something similar. And then I was also going to ask you more about podcasting, but it's ended up being quite a delightful romp through your life.
Sorry, God.
No, it's a good thing. I ruined an end. We could have just finished there on that.
I actually thought this was going to be a chat about podcasting.
On that spruiking of the spin-off podcast plans. But I will ask you, how do you guys gauge, because someone commented on my Facebook page the other day, that was a great episode or whatever, and I don't get a lot of those because the logic is you'd have to really like a podcast episode to go back.
Yeah.
You know, we're lazy. Audience, we get fed so much content these days. We're lazy and blasé about how. So, to my point is, I'm really interested in, if I can ask one question about the spin-off, how do you guys gauge what your audience is engaging with, like what they like, what they don't? Like, how do you get a sense of your podcasting audience? It's such a difficult thing to do. Do you agree?
It is. It's still the same thing, though. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, there's download numbers, and if they tank, then you're like, okay, well, maybe that's
But
not.
then there's like, what's a download? What's a stream? Did they listen for 1 second? Did they listen for 2 hours? Did they listen to it 8 times over?
Oh, look, I don't even get me started on podcast metrics and how
Yeah.
ineffective they are at telling a full picture. But
Yeah.
there's other sort of things, like for the Real Pod, for example, we have a Facebook group that was started. It's called the Real Pod Corner. That is the most wholesome place on the internet. It is an extremely active group, considering that Facebook is basically dead in the water. We've got 1,400 members, and we have secret Santa swaps, we have Christmas parties, we do quizzes, everyone's helping each other with things. Through lockdown, people are sending care packages. They all love the podcast. They live chat reality shows. We've now got a Discord breakout for all those live chats. And to me, that is how we know that is it might not be the biggest audience in the world, but it's a really committed and loyal audience.
We talked about this when we first met. Like, the other thing is New Zealand's only got 4 or 5 million people in it, and we all know about how Fraction Media works. Like, to have 1,500 people committed, that's a really good sign that
and
things
this
are
is
going
committed
well.
to next level. Like, these people, like, we have badges, we have, they identify really strongly with the podcast, and I love that so much. In terms of our other podcasts, Gone by Lunchtime, When the Facts Change, it's purely like we do get feedback from people. We do get emails. They're not like firing through, because as you say, I love a lot of things. I don't go on and comment
well,
on
when I started making these, I realised, like, Lewis, you need to actually be a more responsible audience member. Like, you do need to like reach out and go, because even someone leaving a comment on my iTunes podcast page, like some of those they're an affirmation, they're like, and they're there for other people to see. And so what I started saying in my intros is something along the lines of like, Koha is a like or a share. If you listen to this, even if you're just saying to your mate, hey, have you listened to that episode?
Right, if you guys have got to the end of this, however long it's been, you need to go and give give Lewis a like, give this a share, rate it on. You can rate on Spotify now.
Yeah,
you can
then go and listen to Jane's podcast and then like that and share that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I think we should end on just one of the last one there.
The blue one?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Jane from C4. You're listening to Static. And so am I.
Oh.
I'm not on the television. I'm listening to Static. It's much better.
Thank you.
Probably is, to be fair.